Hey everybody, welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Chu. This is episode number 87. My name is Gabe Estel. I'm here with my co-hosts Dennis Levi Leach and Jonathan Getz. How's it going, guys?
Not bad.
Good to see you on this winter night. So tonight, got a very special guest. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. I think even if you don't know his name, you certainly know, I think our listeners will know a lot of the albums he's worked on, including, I think, some of the best records of the last 10 years or so. So we're really excited to talk about our guest, Collin Dupuis. Before we get into that, though, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about baseball. As you guys know, we could call it the cold stove as opposed to the hot stove, because not really a lot has gone on. You see that? I just came up with that right there. Not a lot has really gone on, at least over the last probably month or so, after some activity at the beginning of the off season. But recently, I believe it was Cubs convention this weekend here in Chicago, and Cubs owner Tom Ricketts said that franchise career home run leader, the sort of blacklisted Sammy Sosa, needs to put everything on the table. That's Ricketts' quote in regard to his PED use if he ever wants to be welcomed back by the Chicago Cubs. Cubs fans know that Sammy Sosa really hasn't been around much since he left Chicago, and that kind of. You know, there's probably some, as we were discussing earlier before we went on the air, a little bit of hypocrisy there with some of the other personnel moves the Cubs had made, including in bringing in our oldest Chapman, Manny Ramirez, folks with whether it be PED use or domestic violence, sort of off the field behavior. Those folks have been brought in recent years. So some fans would argue that it might be time for the Cubs to welcome Sammy back. Now, we have a big Cubs fan among us. So I'm going to have Levi start off. First question, Levi, should the Cubs, in whatever capacity, I don't know if it's throwing out a pitch or being a team ambassador or whatever, should they welcome back Sammy Sosa?
It's a tough call. A lot of me agrees with Ricketts' statement. You know what I mean? I would just like him to be honest.
Sure.
I don't think the issue so much is anymore with the drug use. It's with the line that all the players were doing, whether it was Sosa or McGuire or Palmeiro or you know what I mean.
The famous finger point from Palmeiro,
right? And you know what I mean? The thing that a lot of those guys stand on is Sosa never had a dirty test. Not one. But this was in the age of when there was they were on early versions of the clear and other types of substances that weren't even being tested for or being detected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, and that has all come to light now as fact. So it's well, I do agree that there should be some vetting on his part of his sins, if you want to say it. But I think a lot of people our age and people of older generations are always going to be hard on PED users.
Sure.
Just because we feel that it taints the game so heavily, and it does.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's eventually going to be a younger generation that's going to never have even seen Jose Canseco or Mark McGuire or Sammy Sosa have even played.
Right.
So they're not going to have those associations with those players. Yeah. They're just going to know, oh, that guy hit a ton of home runs, or that guy stole a ton of bases, or that guy,
Yeah, they grew up in an era of more stringent testing, so it's
I think eventually I think the darkness and shadows that surround a lot of those players are eventually not going to be seen by younger fans.
Yeah.
To whereas I think our generation will always we'll be the old guys in the barber shop, in 20 years still complaining about it.
It would, yeah, good points. I mean, with everything that's happened, and as much as the reputations of those players has been tarnished, it would be awkward to see them up in Cooperstown now. You know, like how would people react? If McGuire and Sosa and Bonds, you know, got in, just to like, I mean, would they address it during their speeches? You know, like I doubt it. I don't know. It's just
right.
It would. I think at this point, I don't think you can let those guys in, for that reason. You know, that might sound weak, and maybe I'm not articulating it well, but so much has transpired, and so much has been written about it, and their reputations have been so soiled that I don't even know if it's worth bothering now. You know, I mean, I think you just leave them out for the sake of there's just too much uncertainty around it. You know,
where do you draw the line though with some players who were around it? Maybe they got a little bit bigger. Maybe they eventually made it to 3,000 hits. You know, a threshold that would otherwise get them in. They would hit 500 home runs.
Yeah,
and they were never as accused as guys like Bonds and Sosa were, but they were still of the ilk, and maybe there was a chance. You know, and so where
somebody
do you
like maybe
line?
Like yeah.
I mean, I don't want to like.
Are you talking people that like got popped or people that didn't?
People that didn't.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't know who those people are.
And actually, you know, there a lot of these players. Bonds never got popped. Bonds never served a suspension.
Right.
Did Sosa actually get popped?
I don't think so.
Levi said no.
So yeah, there's
as far as I know, he never tested.
We know that, or we don't know. But we have great suspicion about these players, and that's undoubted. But
I think
don't
a lot of
know
that
for sure, and that's easy to say for to be the gatekeeper for a guy as obvious as McGuire, who did later admit to it, but. Let's say that there is a guy that you're kind of unsure about, and sure, I have a few guys that I would say that about, but I'm not going to do them a disservice by speaking their names out loud.
Yeah, we don't know.
And so who are we to say for sure that that they would be blacklisted as a result, and I think that you can leave that up to later, not to leave it up to later generations, but put them in there, and if news later comes out, if they admit it on their deathbed, then include that in their Hall of Fame plaque as an addendum.
Yeah. Also, perhaps there's literature out there, and perhaps there's been scientific studies. I assume there has. I don't know. How much I'm curious how much of a difference it made for people. How much of the roids, Canseco claims it made a huge difference for him. I don't know if that was just him trying to sell more books or what. Go ahead.
It comes back almost to I think Deion Sanders said, if you know what I mean? If you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you play good. If you play good, they pay good. So
sure. Yeah, right on.
You know what I mean? And I think they might have helped physically, but they help more, I think, mentally with a lot of those athletes. Whereas, almost not a placebo effect because they were getting bigger.
Sure.
But I think just the power of knowing that you were on something that is enhancing you. Gives you more confidence and more power in your head. You know what I mean?
Oh, that would be a great story if a trainer, told a player that, hey, I'm giving you some juice, but it was just a placebo, and he.
There's a good scientific study,
right?
Yeah, right.
I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, Bonds said this, when he was questioned on it. The baseball's about hand-eye coordination. I mean that. That has some weight too, because I mean, all the people that we just mentioned, I think it's not really debatable that they weren't gifted. They're gifted hitters. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think A-Rod, Bonds, McGuire, maybe not Canseco, I don't know, all those guys would have had, probably Hall of Fame careers.
Oh yeah, I
think maybe not McGuire. McGuire was going down before.
McGuire was kind of having a regress season, but
yeah, I'd have to look at his numbers like entirely in Oakland before I get to St. Louis. I don't know.
We talked about this one time before, and I liken Bonds to Nixon in the fact that it was like Bonds probably would have been in the Hall of Fame without it. You know what I mean? Nixon probably would have won that election without.
Oh, not Otis Nixon. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I had you on the edge of your seat there.
Yeah. No, I mean, Bonds knows how to hit a baseball better than a lot of people do. I mean, regardless of the roids. I'd say the same thing about, even though as unpopular as it is, I'd say the same thing about A-Rod as well. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
With Bonds and A-Rod, it was more about ego because they obviously already had the talent. They could lead the league in home runs, and then Bonds sees what McGuire and Sosa did, and he says, "You want to see what I can do? Screw 70. I could probably take you up to 80." The dude would have hit 85 home runs if he wasn't walked so much that year.
Yeah, sure.
But what do you guys think about, to bring this back to Sosa, the Andy Pettitte approach, which is if he just owned it right away, said, "Yeah, I did it. A lot of people were doing it. Even pitchers were doing it, so I had to keep up with pitchers." Where would his character be considered, and would he be, at the Cubs spring training or whatever it is, the Cubs camp in the middle of the winter, as a team representative?
I think it would be. I think he would be brought back if he admitted. Well, I mean, regardless of what Ricketts said. Most of the people that admitted it, maybe it tarnished him in the short term, but another guy, you mentioned Pettitte, and I had totally forgotten about him until you brought it up. Giambi as well. Giambi admitted it. And he's I think he's a coach now, right?
He was considered for a head coaching job, managerial position for the Rockies, but he didn't get it.
Yeah, he's
McGuire's been a coach.
McGuire's had a
Manny.
Good. McGuire's been a coach for the Dodgers and Cardinals as well. Yeah, so
Yeah, I just feel like if Sosa had owned it as soon as he retired, then they would have welcomed him back eventually, and
I think so.
And there still would have been, he would have been celebrated still for what he was able to accomplish. He made that team a lot of money those years that he was hitting 60. Because people only came for Sosa.
That was him and McGuire performed CPR on baseball that year. I mean,
sure. But those were some shitty Cubs teams, though, right, Levi?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they weren't competing.
Part, the Cubs weren't ultra competitive. They did all right a few of the years he was with us. But,
yeah. 03, right? He was still on the 03 team, right? I mean that would have been the near the end.
It was the come see Sammy hit home run show for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. He made that organization tons of money.
Yeah.
He made the Tribune a lot of money, and then they sold it to the Ricketts.
Yeah.
Sammy's got a subscription to the Tribune still. Prince not dead in Sammy's eyes.
Right.
All right.
They probably gave him a free subscription for life. Money he made.
I don't know. He might last longer in the Tribune, the way Prince headed. But anyway, interesting debate. I would say. I agree with Jonathan. I mean, if I would have taken the short-term hit of just saying I did it, and I think if he did that, he would be in the better graces of the Cubs, but he probably wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I think it's safe to say that Giambi, even though he admitted it, won't get in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Whereas other guys who have denied it, obviously they're not getting in, at least under the sort of the current climate. Yeah.
I agree. And it's interesting that the story like this is coming out now, because this is very much going to be a story for the next 10 years. And at the same time, we should be grateful that we haven't had to think of a lot of 70s and 80s players in the same light, because they were cheating in other ways.
Sure.
With greenies and amphetamines and all that. And we don't have to think of them like that, because that's never going to come out. Or it did come out and it's just accepted as, it was just part of the culture, those crazy 70s.
Right.
You're just lucky that they werennt doing blow on home plate.
Taking acid and pitching no-hitters.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, more, byproducts of the era, so to speak, with this, drugs in the 70s and 80s, recreational drugs, some recreational drugs. It'll
be an interesting next decade as it progresses, for sure.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like a lot of Hall of Fame voters, the younger Hall of Fame voters, are more accepting of the juicers and just looking at the numbers and not considering the allegations.
That's a good point. I think that there is a generational gap in how folks view it. Baseball is still, and this is arguable, even though it's my favorite sport, is seen as America's pastime. And so I think a lot of people, like, if you watch some of that footage, when those guys were had to testify before the Senate, and there was a lot of like senators grandstanding, like, oh, you're corrupting our game, and there was a lot of finger wagging and a lot of people, a lot of politicians taking the moral high ground, which I find maybe not as bad as taking steroids, but at least somewhat equally off-putting.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So that always kind of bothered me during that. Was I don't know. This whole notion of the integrity of the game. I don't know.
The game's always been kind of dirty.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't. I
mean, it's not like
if you're looking for perfection. Yeah. If you're looking for,
these aren't choir boys.
Yeah. Right.
Never have been. Been.
Yep. So, we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, if the Ricketts sell the team, and Sammy's still around, I don't know. Maybe the next owners will welcome him back. I mean, he's been a pretty reclusive figure, and there's sort of some health conditions as well, like his skin has. I mean, like as well. So like there's kind of sort of ambiguities surrounding Sammy beyond baseball as well. So that might factor into how people accept him.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Absolutely. Because McGwire, on the other hand, is this kind of like, oh shucks, I really feel bad about this, and I got to tell my son about it, and I cried about telling my son. Sosa is, it seems like, is much more awkward and doesn't have the benefit of being as an identifiable guy.
Right.
Because because he doesn't speak the language that well, and
yeah, sure.
And so it's harder for him to win over Americans in general.
Yeah. I think that's a really valid point. So Sammy, if you're out there,
hey, he can come on. We'll talk about it.
We'll have you on the show. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. If you want to go to a lesser known media outlet, we're here for you. But anyway. So good conversation. We'll see how it shakes out. But want to go ahead and get into the heart of the order tonight with a very special interview we've got. Our guest today is Collin Dupuis, a two-time Grammy-winning mixer, producer, and engineer based out of Nashville and Detroit. We tracked Collin down because of his recent work on one of our favorite albums of 2017. That's Marty Stuart's Way Out West. But with just over 15 years in the industry, Collin's resume is already an impressive roster of artists. Includes Dr. John, The Black Keys, St. Vincent, Lana Del Rey, and Angel Olsen, as well as some of our personal favorites like Grant-Lee Phillips, Brownout, and Bombino. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Collin Dupuis.
So, Collin, thank you so much for joining us. Now, first of all,
no problem.
Yeah, it's well, where are you right now? Are you in?
I'm actually in Detroit, Michigan right now.
Detroit,
doing some work with some artists that I've worked with, and I'm working with in Detroit. So yeah, it's awesome.
Right.
That's kind of where I'm from, Michigan originally. Yeah, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth being an audio engineer, in the Detroit area.
Right.
Nashville.
Yeah, so it's like Detroit, Nashville, and a bit of Akron still.
No, I have the Akron involvement is that I was working as I've done all you name it in recording studios. I've done it, like wiring studios, fixing things, checking equipment, recording records. Kind of like the very blue collar Midwestern kind of approach to stuff. Like be good at all the things that are involved in the job you do and have a hard work ethic. And the Akron connection is from Dan Allerbeck of the Black Keys, hiring me to set up help him get his studio wired up and running at his home studio. And what happened is he moved to Nashville and then called me on the phone and said, "Can you help me get my studio in Nashville going?" And I didn't know I was going to be moving. And then all of a sudden I'm making records, and all of a sudden I'm moving.
I bet that could be whirlwind.
Yeah, it was very much whirlwind. I mean, it went to I helped him work on a little bit of that Jessica Lee Mayfield record that he did at his house in Akron, and I fixed him with the equipment for him, did all kinds of stuff like that, and then he called me one day on the phone and was like, "Hey, I bought a space in Nashville, a building," and so I went down and checked it out, and he had hired a company that does that kind of stuff to build studios, and they built it out, and then we got to work and we made the Black Keys record and quite a few other really good records within that first year, and kind of put it on the map. He was already really was on the map because of the Brothers record, but it took everything that I was doing with him to a different level because we opened the studio up. I helped him open his studio up, and we one after another, record after record, of really great records.
For sure.
Which led to that Dr. John record that won a Grammy and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. It was really a lot of fun. Really great. Great studio. Really amazing person to work for, too. He's a highly talented individual on every level you can think of. Songwriter, singer, producer. Really, really, really amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and I was blown away when I saw that that he would be producing that latest Bombino record. I thought, oh wow, that's kind of out of nowhere, and Bombino being an artist that I appreciated, I thought, oh, this is a perfect pairing.
Yeah, exactly. That was I don't know how that got hooked up, but it was one of those kind of it happened, and all of a sudden we're making this record with Bombino, and this whole band is there in the studio, these Malian cats, and it was one of the hottest summers of Nashville too, in a while. I guess record temperatures was every day during that session it was 105, with 80% humidity.
I'm sure that band could roll with it.
Oh yeah, they were hanging around outside, smoking cigarettes and drinking hot tea that they cooked over fire out in the back on the grill in the back.
Wonderful.
Because it wasn't hot enough. Yeah.
Yeah, no. They literally they have this tea, it's this really strong gunpowder tea they make, Chinese gunpowder, and they cook it in the water to really make it strong, and then they put a bunch of sugar in it, and then they drink shots of it like espresso, kind of like Turkish coffee in a way.
Wow.
Like a really strong green tea, and they're offering you some, and it's 100 degrees out, and you're like, yeah, I'll drink some hot tea. It's so weird. And they're just oh, this is nothing. So yeah, that was a whirlwind. That was a fun record. That record happened really fast too. The whole process of that record was I think we tracked it in 5 days or something like that.
Oh,
It was a really fast process. And mixed it in 2 or 3. Yeah, that was fun. A lot of fun.
So
and they're amazing live.
Oh yes.
You ever seen them live?
I haven't had the pleasure. No.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah. It's really amazing actually. Bombino's set is it's like a transcendental experience really.
I once
plays
saw
and plays and plays and plays.
I did see him as a backup clapper at a Tenariwen show once, and that was cool.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like watching Hendrix and like some other stuff, like with this Mayan, like kind of like trance music. Like they just play and play and play. Like the songs are 15 or 20 minutes long, and they go and go and go, and it's like just this high intensity thing just keeps building and building and building. It's really amazing. So I would highly suggest it.
Absolutely, yeah. So to take a step back real quick regarding, you're an engineer, you're a mixer. So many casual music fans might not understand the contribution of a recording engineer or a mixer. How do you explain to them what you do?
Yeah. Well, in the real basic terms, what an engineer does and what I do is that we facilitate the technical aspect of capturing musical performances. Onto the intended equipment, whatever equipment that is, like if it's onto analog tape or onto a computer or some other kind of recording format, digital, multi-track, or whatever, we are involved in the communicating the artistic direction that the artist is intending, what the producer is intending with their direction of the art. That's what a producer does, is directing and overseeing the creative process, and is communicating to the engineer their desires, and the artists are communicating their desires to the engineer, and the engineer is facilitating these desires onto the technical formats of recording. And the same thing with mixing. We're hired to take these things that exist and to create a final stereo or multi-stem, like a surround format, whatever, of the recorded material, and turn it into something that has an emotional impact that gets the art across to the listener. So it's both sides. You have to be creative, technically, understand all the equipment, have that become kind of your instrument, and then you also have to have a creative viewpoint to the process. So it's not just technical, because at least that's how I approach it. Like it's a bunch of it is just emotional management, managing the emotional content and making sure that gets across to the listener. Because, wow. Hey, I'm a musician and a fan of music, so I'm more than just a guy who learned how to be an audio engineer. Like, first and foremost, I'm a musician and a fan of music, so engineering is just an extension of that, of musical studies, basically.
So when is your job fun and when is it a chore ever, if it ever is?
It can be a chore. Mostly it's when the hours get past 12 hours a day. Yeah. Is when you're kind of beating a dead horse, like where, and not always, not every time this happens. Most of the time you hit 10th to 12th hour and just, the energy of everyone is done, yeah. And then you usually are done by then. Every now and then you get a situation where someone is trying to push through, either because they only have so many days booked and they're trying to use, and usually it's people who aren't as experienced in making records are trying to do that. The first record, they're like, oh, we have the studio for 24 hours for a week. And so they want to try to work for 24 hours every day. And it's like they quickly learn that their creativity is just like any business, like, the people doing the work, the creativity, it's a exponential scale downward, from quality to crap. So, but I've had some exceptions where you're on the 16th hour or 20th hour, some amazing stuff happens. But most of the time it doesn't. So that's the only chore part of it, is the hours. Yeah. When you get people who want to do those kind of hours, who don't understand efficiency, and that really 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours is enough. And they're not going to get anything better out of themselves, especially if they're singing.
Sure. And one of your recent projects, Marty Stewart's Way Out West, was a favorite of all of ours in 2017, and you were involved in mixing a couple of those tracks. How was that experience
Recording
for you?
It too.
Recording them as well.
You engineered those, yeah. Nice.
Engineered. Yeah, I tracked those. Like, it was great. I mean, those guys are pros. I mean, those kind of records, like those kind of sessions are easy, because those guys
are
Those
professionals.
Pros. Really.
Seasoned pros. Yeah, we're talking someone who's been doing it longer than I've been alive, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I was born in 1974. Yeah. Exactly. Like I was born in '74, and Marty Stuart was making records before I was born.
Right. Yeah.
So,
it's so funny. The other day, I came across in a store one of Marty's records from 1982, and it says he's 22 years old, and he'd been on the road over a decade.
Yeah, exactly. He started making records when he was like 12 or 13. You know, so he started like probably right around when I was born, or right before that. So he's been involved in music longer than I've been like thinking about music, at least, you know, like.
Yeah. So
when going into a studio with guys like that, and all of his band members are ridiculous musicians.
Oh yeah,
they're ridiculous
absolutely.
musicians, and they're producers themselves. These guys all make records for other people also as producers and songwriters. I mean, Nashville is completely, it's like another level, and it really has brought my game up a lot working in that city, because you're working with people who know what's going on. They're not, you know, green at all. These people, like everyone in that town, knows what they're doing when they're doing something purposeful. So that session was easy. I just had to make sure it sounded good. You know, I just had to not get in the way of their musical process and not take forever to set anything up. You know, and that's what I think has made what I do always fun for a lot of artists, because I work very, very quickly, and I don't get too focused on technical. Like, I'm not try to get a sound on some instrument for half an hour, or whatever other kind of crazy thing that I hear people do. Like, people walk in, they set up, they make sure we can hear each other in the headphones, and then we start recording. And that's it. Which is about a half an hour setup time.
And that beckons back to an older fashioned way of recording, which I think, is better a lot of the times. Would you agree with that?
I think that, like, the 50s and 60s, the engineers back then, because of the limited technology they had to work with, they had to be very good, with understanding how their microphones relate to what they're capturing, and everything was final, because back then they were recording to a single mono track machine, right, or a stereo machine. There was no multi-track in the late 50s and early 60s. It wasn't until the mid-60s that multi-track even started to happen on a large scale. There may have been like Les Paul and some of the other guys who were tinkering, but there was no production machines available until like the mid-60s, where studios could buy one from a company like Ampex, for instance.
Yeah.
So late 50s, early 60s engineers had to be able to capture a full band performance with lead vocal live and be done with it. And that got cut onto a record. Like that mix was cut. So you were mixing while tracking. You were done.
Yep.
So that mentality is I try to approach that as much as possible, given the context of the music I'm working on. Obviously, every record's different, but and I not afraid of computers, and I use them a lot, but I still approach it from that aspect, like minimalism, less mics, more straightforward approach, making sure the musicians feel that they can just perform and not concerned about like what I am doing, and I'm not wasting their time, like, trying to get a sound on something,
So are you even able to casually listen to music, or are you just always engineering and mixing in your head as you listen to music?
Yeah, I can let go. I mean, I listen to music that I enjoy that I didn't work on, and I can just listen to it. Of course, you analyze stuff, like, mostly because you're trying to learn from it. Of course, you're like listening to something and going, man, listen to the sound of that. Like, how did they record that? Like, what microphone? But still, I can just listen to it and be blown away by it. Like, a really great record that I think, is a pinnacle of sonic. If you guys aren't keen to this record, to me, it's kind of like, it's just a pinnacle of what records sounded like at a certain point in time in history. And it's the Staple Singers, gospel group.
Yeah.
It's their record. Hold on, I have to think off the top of my head. It's called Hammer and Nails.
Yeah.
Hammer and Nails. Okay.
Good. Hammer and Nails by the Staple Singers. It's on iTunes. You can buy it on iTunes. You can get it places like that. The way that record is recorded, and the singing, and just the sound of it, and the singing and the emotion that's captured on it is phenomenal. It is like, it's like Elvis Presley's records were. It's like, Johnny Cash's records were, like those early records where it's like, just the sound of it is so clear and perfect, and it's so well recorded. It's kind of scary. It's hard to, and it was recorded like in the early 60s or something like that, right?
Right.
So it's like recorded live to a stereo tape machine, probably a tube tape machine, or if it was solid state. Either way, it sounds amazing. And it was recorded probably with like 3 or 4 microphones, probably not a lot. But when you listen to it, you're like, it's just crazy how good it sounds. So that record to me is kind of like an example of what you should try to aim for when capturing organic music that's not electronic and programmed. Obviously, there's a big difference between things.
Like, what would be some of your other favorite moments on records? Like anything from a song to a drum fill?
Oh yeah, I have, like, Hendrix's Axis Boulder's Love. That record is full of stuff. Like full of amazing sonic moments, and musical things. The drummer Mitchell, the way he played on that record, the way he played on all of Hendrix records, his jazzy approach to rock, like, of course, Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. Of course, Johnny Cash's early stuff, the Sun Years, Sun Records stuff. That stuff is all just so amazing. Roy Orbison is actually probably one of the best. Also, like Roy's, his 50s, late 50s, early 60s mono recordings sound like they're in stereo to me, even though they're totally mono. Like the depth in which how they captured all that stuff, and it was all mono, how it sounds so full and great. It's just like amazing. Like,
yeah, I agree. His old stuff on Monument Records, it was
exactly
pretty.
That's the stuff.
It's untouchable.
It really is. Yeah, that's a great. I mean, those are shining examples of like the pinnacle of audio technology for the time. Really, I'd say even up to now, like, we're still like, we can listen back to that stuff. Not saying we should try to make records like that, because we just make different music nowadays. It's a different cultural experience now.
Yeah,
music is. But sonically, listening to those records, we have to go, man, that is great. Like, that is just such good sonics. Like, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's tons of records. There's so many things that I have in my head from listening to music as a kid growing up. Like, and anybody who's a music lover, that's how it is for them.
So do you have any tips for DIY home recording musicians, like quick, easy do's and don'ts to keep a session productive?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is don't get bogged down by trying to have all the best equipment and spending a bunch of money on stuff. Especially when you're starting out, like, don't go and spend $10,000 or $5,000 on a bunch of equipment when you're just trying to figure out how to do stuff. Like, get something basic going, whatever the format that is. If you think you want to do analog tape recording, then you got to get good at mechanical work. Like, you have to get good at fixing the thing, because there's not as many tape technicians. Really none, unless you live in Nashville or Los Angeles or New York. People actually know how to work on those machines. So you're going to learn via forums and things how to keep your machine running if you're going to get a tape machine. Absolutely, I suggest doing it if you want to do that sound and get analog tape going. But it's going to be more effort on your time, more time spent getting that stuff running and making sure it's running and making sure it's aligned and calibrated and all the stuff you have to do. But if you want to just record and be creative, then I suggest get a computer, get a basic audio interfaces. There's so many of them now that sound really good. They all sound really good at really great price points. Get 1 or 2 good microphones that you like, maybe 3 or 4 if you can afford them, and then a really great pair of speakers. The best, most expensive speakers, or not most expensive, the best sounding speakers you can afford. Which models I can't tell you, because everyone's ears are different and what appeals to them is different, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's like, you tell people like these speakers are the best, and other people are like, I can't stand the way those speakers sound. So that's a very, very subjective thing. But get a pair that are trying to be as accurate as possible, and make sure that the environment in which those speakers are sitting in is somewhat acoustically controlled. Spend some time consulting the internet, asking people, and figure out what products will best treat a room's acoustics for you to be able to hear what the speakers are telling you and not to be ruining the process for you.
Those are great.
You have to be able to
tips.
hear the speakers. Yeah, you have to be able to hear the speakers and hear accuracy somewhat. And if you're in a room, like a bedroom or something, and it has a lot of weird reflections and weird resonances because the room is small, you have to treat that room to some extent, or you just won't know what you're listening to. And I think that's the most important thing, is learning how to have speakers and learning how to hear them and having an environment that they are somewhat accurate in.
Okay.
Is more important than any of the microphones, actually, or any of that stuff.
All right.
Because if you can't hear what the speakers are telling you, how do you know that $1,000 microphone or $500 microphone that you spent money on sounds good? If you can't tell it what it sounds like, because you're in a room that sounds bad.
You have to start at the end.
Yep.
Another album that you had a hand in was actually turned out to be a pair of records. They released a second one, the Brownout Brown Sabbath records. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Yeah, when the first one came out in 2014, I kind of highlighted it in one of the episodes of the podcast.
Yep. Yeah, those guys are great. So it was two different records put out by a Texas group they're like kind of what would you consider? They're kind of like a funk Spanish jam band in a way, or party band. I would say a party band. Yeah, they're like a band, like a Latin jamming party, rock and roll funk party band. Like a horn section, and I mean they're great. They're all really great musicians and very talented individuals. And so I mixed the first record, which was it's all Black Sabbath covers, but their own versions of it. And then they hired me again to mix the second one. And it was great because I'm a fan of Black Sabbath, and it was a lot of fun to work on those records because it was like, a new approach to it, and lots of like really great percussion going on. And, it's all really recorded really cool, like really good spatial recording. Yeah,
it's got a great big sound, and the horns and the percussion do really stand out on it.
Yeah, well, it's because those are really strong points in the music, and like when mixing Latin music, you have to approach it from like what is important in Latin music. Latin music is so much of it is important is the rhythmic element, and so the percussion is highly important in that music. Understanding what it means and its cultural viewpoints and just what moves the rhythm, just those polyrhythmic things that are going on. So yeah, I'm also a big fan of Afro-Cuban music, and I studied a little bit at university, studied jazz drumming. So that's kind of one of my backgrounds anyways, as a musician.
Nice.
Yeah, sounds like it was a good pair then. Good pairing.
Yeah, it was great. And then, and it's funny is I did this other record called Spanish Gold, the band, which is the guitar player from my brain goes blank all the time because I have to remember a million things.
You've got the drummer from My Morning Jacket, correct?
Yeah, exactly. My drummer from My Morning Jacket. And who else was on? It was guitar from that band.
Brownout?
Which I can't. Yeah, Brownout. His other. Yep, but it's not Brownout. What is his main band called? It's called something else. It's called, or he was in there. I don't know if he's in there anymore, but that he played guitar. He played some really cool stuff. Dante from the band Hacienda.
Okay.
Dante Schwebel. He's the one who wrote he wrote a lot of the songs, at least lyrically. I don't know if he wrote all of the song structures too, but he was very involved in the songwriting. So it was them, and that record turned out really cool. That was a lot of fun to make also.
Right on. So, just one more question, and we'll have you on your way. So as streaming music subscriptions, continue to grow, but so have, ironically, vinyl sales, what are your hopes for the future of music fidelity and distribution and consumption?
Oh, man. Well, I hope that people keep paying for music and actually just outright buy records because, the streaming services just aren't cutting it right for artists. The payouts aren't right enough. And I don't think in the current models and the current contracts, they're not right, and that needs to be fixed. that needs to be negotiated much more fairly, so the artists are actually getting parts of the content, much more of the content payout, because currently the models are most of the money goes to the labels that own the rights to the music, and then the payout is so small. When you're talking about 1 million streams being like $150 or whatever the crazy number it ends up being, that's crazy. It's like so that'll get figured out. So hopefully that gets figured out. If not, then maybe people will start to buy music again and pay for it. And that's in my opinion, I'm personally not a fan of streaming because of what it pays out to the artists, because it's just not fair. It's not paying artists properly at all. It's people used to be able to hedge out a living when they could sell a certain amount of records, but now a lot of artists I know are like touring 9 to 12 months out of the year to try to make their living. They're not making any money from selling records or streaming payouts. Like, they're not. The royalties just aren't there the way it should be. But vinyl is great that people are doing that more, and that's encouraging people to buy vinyl record players and get into this physical format and the artistic relationship of that. The big covers, the art, the packaging, all that is related to it, and how that emotionally impacts people's relationship to music. Because, if you grew up with that, like I did as a kid, like, you sat and looked at the covers and imagined what those records were like what was the reason, why did they do that? And like, you started imagining and coming up with your own scenarios of the band playing and how that happened in the studio. At least that's how I imagined it when I was a kid. How did this all happen? Like, what were they doing? Like, how did they get that to sound that way? So those relationships are really important to music, and the imagery that's related. And I think the vinyl format is it's something you can hold in your hand. I mean, not to paraphrase too much of it, Jack White says the same kind of stuff. Like, it's such a physical thing, and you're so connected to this physical thing. Hence why he started up his own record processing company, at Third Man, because he believes in this as art, not just as a commodity. Like, it's more valuable than just a commodity. It's a part of our cultural experience, part of our cultural identity. So anyone who's trying to help move that along and help maintain human connection to that, where it's not just background noise. The music isn't just listened to while you do like your chores or something. Like, not saying that isn't valid either, but if that's the only thing people do to consume music, and they don't focus on listening to it on purpose, then all those people making music will stop doing it. Because we can't live, Yeah. So,
truth. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's very, very, very important that vinyl has been really great at recreating connection with younger crowds to the physical aspect of the art. And it's also putting money in artists' pockets, because people actually have to buy the record. They can't just go to YouTube and stream it. Actually have to buy it. And I think streaming is great because it helps people find music that they would never find otherwise, like, old jazz records and old jazz recordings that are rare, that aren't on press, or aren't being printed. You can't get them in iTunes. That's great. But when it's a brand new record by an artist and it's being streamed and put up by people who are just fans of the music, but YouTube is making money off of advertising from it, or Google is, then they're not paying the artist because Google didn't authorize the upload, but they're still slapping advertisements on it. That has to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you can't tell me the biggest tech company in the world can't control their own networks. When they say that we can't control it, we don't know how to do this. It's like, come on, guys. You guys have artificial intelligence, the biggest artificial intelligence computers in the world. And you guys can't control content upload?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well,
I don't believe it.
Hopefully they'll get it figured out sooner rather than later, because
absolutely,
much
sooner. Yeah,
the experience has become diluted a bit, I think, for most of a generation of music consumers now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but people like yourself, obviously, with the work that you do, are enriching the industry, and we are certainly fortuitous for that. And so, Collin, we just want to thank you again for your time, and we look forward to your future projects.
Thank you for letting me get on your show and rant a little bit about music and art and a little bit of politics involved in it. Let me express my opinion, because in the big scheme of things, that we're all here to try to do something that we love doing, and music and art is like, it's why you would get into a crazy business like the music business. Unless you don't love it, like, and it's not for you, because it's very hard to do.
I'd like to thank, again, Collin Dupuis for taking the time to chat with us. You can review a list of Collin's work at his website. That's collindupuis.com. That's Collin with 2 L's, DUPUIS.com. We also will link to Collin's website from our site, rockchew.com. Want to remind everybody you can find all of our episodes there at rockchew.com. Every single one that we've ever recorded, all 87 of them now. 87. Good going. We made it, kid. All right. So I want to remind everybody as well that you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at RockInChew. That's rock as in there's no way that Sammy Sosa's coming back to the Cubs anytime soon. Sorry. Yeah, right. But anyway, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at RockInChew. Also, you can like us on Facebook. And also, please leave us a review on iTunes or comment on the YouTube videos. That would help us out a lot. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting apps as well. So however you listen to us, just give us a shout out. We'd appreciate it. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Peace.
Good night.